Welcome! In this lecture, I'll explain what layers are and why they're useful in Photoshop. If you already understand this subject, feel free to skip to the next lecture as this is oriented towards beginners. To help you understand this concept, I've opened up this PSD that you have attached to this lecture. You can think of layers as transparent pieces of paper that stack on top of each other. Each layer is an opportunity to create something new. If you look at this project, you can see we have several layers in this panel. We have a background layer, the frame, all this text, and so on. When you look at the project from this perspective, all these individual pieces of transparent paper are stacked on top of each other. So what you end up with is a canvas that looks like a flat image. If I were to hide this layers panel, would you be able to tell how many components this project has? Of course not. It looks like one single image. But if we open up this other PSD, we can see the true story. Here, I illustrated how this project would look if you were to see it from the side. This perspective shows us the truth. Each individual piece of paper, meaning each layer, has something different on it. This first one shows the background. The next contains the frame. The third one showcases the piece of paper, and so on. When you bring them close together, you can see the end result is very similar to what we see in our other tab. Let's go back to it. You may be wondering, why the trouble? Well, let's get the brush tool by pressing B. If you're not sure you've got it, go to your toolbar, click and hold, and you'll activate it. Now, with white as my foreground colour, I'll start to paint on the background layer. You can tell it's selected because Photoshop highlights it. As you can see, nothing happens with my frame or anything else, and that's because even though this looks like a solid image, it's actually composed out of several layers. Because I have my background layer selected, my changes are going to affect it and only it. Press Ctrl Z to undo. If I switch to the paper layer and I repeat my brushing, you'll see it seems like my wood layer was compromised, but that's not the case. If we switch to the Move tool by pressing V, we can see it's safe and sound. It seems like it was affected because each layer is transparent. Photoshop works this way from CS3, and the reason is simple. It gives you more freedom. If you slaved away for hours on end to create this perfect background, you don't want it ruined by a slip-up. So instead of risking all your work, you create a new layer that will sit on top of your existing project, and you can continue without worry. This gives you a lot of flexibility because you can isolate each element. How many layers you create is up to you, and we'll talk more about that in the upcoming lectures. One important notice before we wrap up. The order of these layers matters. If I bring this background layer above the paper, you'll no longer see it. Indeed, they are transparent pieces of paper, but I chose to completely fill this background layer with colour, hence why it's no longer transparent. So you have to be careful with your stacking order in the Layers panel. We'll discuss this subject in greater detail in this section. Okay, that wraps it up. I hope layers are no longer a mystery to you. Let's continue.